Piece of literature that we talked about in class the most that handles pseudo-events would definitely be Daniel Borsten's The Image. The whole entire book is about pseudo-events. It says right on the page, a guide to pseudo-events in America. So it was written in 1961, and it's still pretty accurate today. So what is a pseudo-event? So according to Daniel Borsten, in his book The Image, pseudo-events are man-made events that possess certain characteristics, and we're going to talk about those. So one of them is that they're not spontaneous. They're more planned or like incited. Another characteristic is that they're planned for the purpose of being covered by the media. Another characteristic is that its interest arises largely from an ambiguous relation to the reality of the situation. And then also they're self-fulfilling prophecies. So that means like if a company is celebrating itself being a great company at this event, then that like inherently makes it a great company.
Obviously, you're putting your best foot forward and you're putting an angle out there. A pseudo event is very much a first date. You're getting a version of you, but not necessarily an unvarnished version of you. And that's important for any journalist to understand, and also for any PR practitioner to understand. And when you're a journalist, obviously the focus is just what does my audience get out of this. When you're a PR practitioner, I think you need to think about what does my client want, and then how do I best connect the client's wishes with what would actually resonate with the journalist, and then the journalist would connect with an audience.
So this press conference is a sort of pseudo event. So in the book, she talks about kind of unraveling what's behind this setup. And one quote is that she says, "Something far weirder is next to the stage. It looks like piles of raw steaks, bottles of wine, pallets of water, and a propped up magazine." "They're not even Trump steaks," one reporter says. Sure enough, the plastic wrap is emblazoned with Bush Brothers, the name of a butcher in Palm Beach. The water is from Village Springs in Connecticut. Again, this is not a deep investigative work. It says Village Springs in small print on the label. And Village Springs is a company that sells water with any label you want to put on it. That's the business. Trump simply paid for them for the label. Same with the magazine. It's a glossy brochure published by a company called the Palm Beach Media Group. Like the water bottler, it's another company that offers customizable content. This displays clearly Trump's counter-argument to Mitt Romney, who itemized the mogul's many failed businesses. But the display actually proves Romney's point. None of the items on the table, not one, actually represents an ongoing business of Donald Trump.
What I've particularly seen from a journalistic standpoint is too often they are just fulfilling the desires of the client, and that's dangerous, not just from a standpoint of turning off some journalists, but really turning off any journalists. Any newsroom on a daily basis is bombarded with press releases about pseudo events. They're not all getting covered, not even close to all of them. News still has to occur there. There still needs to be something that is interesting, relevant, and useful to an audience that a journalist is going to say, hey, this is worth my time and value. It's not power, it's responsibility. It's important that we don't just go there and be stenographers. We do have to make decisions and weigh things based on what is supported by the facts, what would have the greatest impact on the community or constituency that I'm trying to report for here, and make those decisions on their behalf. Again, not necessarily to take a side in it, but just to say, okay, what information is going to best empower and inform our audience so they can make wise decisions based on knowledge, not based on spin, not based on intention of a public relations practitioner or their client. The shift I saw really is more toward owned media. And, there used to be a necessity for earned media simply because in a pre-internet day, you didn't have direct access to audiences. If you wanted a mass audience, you had to go through a traditional provider. When I was at the Broad College, we really worked a lot on owned media. We worked on making sure that we were filing a story a day on our website, that we were targeting our audiences through our website and through our social media channels, that we were building our social media audiences. And you look at how that kind of has grown with brands taking charge of their own stories and finding ways to tell stories. Well, in my year, we saw tremendous growth in our audience and audience engagement in our social media audience as well. And a lot of it was because we were finding ways to tell the story every day of our college and its people.
Doesn't this remind us of the Islamic State using social media marketing to recruit? That was in Like War, the book we read by P.W. Singer and Emerson T. Brooking. And on page 150, they talk about if there was any great difference between the effectiveness of the Islamic State and that of terrorist groups past, it wasn't in the brains of ISIS fighters, it was in the medium they were using. A couple pages later, they say, like any savvy marketer and Russian sock puppets, ISIS sought to hijack trending hashtags and inject itself into unrelated stories. An example of this was when they talked about, this is our football, it's made of skin. They used the hashtag World Cup so that people would see it. Making that connection to what Omar was saying about owned media now, in this case, they were using viral marketing as their most powerful tool. So they were using their owned media to recruit members, and it turned Hussein into a celebrity, as Daniel Boorstin would say, and not a hero.
From a journalistic perspective, you just need to remember you're not there to cover an event, you're there to find something new, to discover something. And as a PR practitioner, you need to be aware of that, and that you're not just trying to serve your client, you're trying to serve your client and connect with an audience through the journalist. So you really need to be thinking multidimensionally from the PR angle and from the journalistic angle. You need to have the idea that you're an explorer, not a stenographer.
To wrap up this discussion, like Boorstin said, there was a shift from heroes to celebrities in the image. Omar said there has been a shift from earned media to owned media recently. And owned media has been used, for example, by ISIS to recruit members for their cause, like they talked about in Like War. And to wrap up the idea of pseudo-events should be practiced with the audiences in mind and should be thought of as how would an audience benefit from this event instead of how would we benefit from this event. It's also important not to benefit your brand, like Donald Trump was trying to do at his press conference with the steaks and the wines and everything. That was unbelievable. And also, it's more important than ever to be truthful when you're reporting pseudo-events, because if one outlet isn't truthful, then all media is ridiculed as fake news.